Hello guys, in today's video we're going to see the second prologue of the Bleach light novel Can't Fear Your Own World. So what are we waiting for? Let's start the video. In Soul Society, there is a man. Looking up to the Shinigami who once saved his life, this man also aimed himself down the same path. That man, despite being a commoner from the Rukongai, achieved excellence at the Shino Academy and ascended to the position of vice captain after becoming a seated member. Righteous, faithful to orders, willing to risk injury in order to save his comrades, even going as far as to stake his own life for the sake of Soul Society. What's more, he is possessed of a ruthlessness in dealing with hostiles, and although he prefers to play fair, when it's for the sake of justice he is a man capable of lurking in the mud and utterly slaughtering the enemy in a surprise attack. He is one that grants death to his enemy. He is one that purifies death from the world. And he is one who transforms the deaths of those residing in the human world into salvation. Evidently, one might call it the template of a Shinigami in Soul Society. For better or worse, he was a man that embodied the unique quality of a Shinigami of the Gate 13. The name of that Shinigami, Hisagi Shuhei. His position as vice captain of Squad 9 is enough to go down in Soul Society's records. A formidable warrior who clearly draws a line between himself and ordinary foot soldiers. However, even if he remained in Soul Society's records, there is a clear wall between himself and those who remained in everyone's memories such as Yamamoto Shijikuni Genryusai, Zaraki Kenpachi and Kurosaki Ichigo. Taking such aspects into account, he was described by those around him as being typical of a vice captain. Whether that assessment could be taken as words of praise or ridicule, Hisagi Shuhei himself will never know. Nevertheless, he would likely never change his way of life, even if he did know. Because he has already chosen a way of life for himself. Was it when his life was saved by a Shinigami? The moment he first gripped a Zanpakuto after entering the Shino Academy? When he lost his comrades in a training exercise? When he encountered a man whose mode of existence was worthy of imitation for his own, thus deciding to devote his life to that man as his adjutant? Or is it when he cut down that very man with his own hands? It was not clear to anyone at which point in time he accepted the Shinigami way of life. Perhaps, not even to Hisagi Shuhei himself who continues to walk down this road. At Seireitei, in front of the 1st Division barracks. Well then, do you have any last words? The captain commander's remark calmly echoes around the criminal. A few days after the conclusion of the war against the Quincies. Although the removal of the mysterious bird-like creatures that came raining down on Seireitei had also been completed, and the stench of death has faded considerably from the surroundings, the threads of tension which remained as unchanged as it was during the course of the war is currently spreading around the front of the 1st Division barracks. Around Kiyuraku, the captain commander, are members of the punishment force who manage Muken, which is the lowest level of the underground prison, as well as the captain-rank Shinigami who have been deployed as a contingency measure. The man accused of high treason who was temporarily released from Muken, Aizen, is to be reincarcerated. As it currently stands, many Shinigami have passed away as a result of battle against a Quincy, and the majority of those who had made it to safety were still in the midst of receiving medical treatment. Thanks to the assistance of Inoue Urahime, many Shinigami who were between the threshold of life and death were able to hold on to their lives. However, the power of her Soten Kissen is not suited to the recovery of lost Ryatsu. Even though wounds can be made to heal, if they are completely cured up to the point of their original Ryatsu, the lives of the other patients as well as Urahime's endurance itself would hang in the balance. Consequently, Urahime was put in charge of critically ill patients who were at a level where they could not be handled by anyone else. Treatment moved forward in the form of handing over those who had gotten over the worst into the hands of Squad 4. Even the powers of Urahime, which was able to regenerate in a rancor who had the upper half of their body blown off, has its limits. Those who have allowed too much time to pass since receiving the fatal injury, those who have had their souls extinguished completely, and those who have not left the slightest trace of themselves in the first place, are all the likes of which Soten Kissen is helpless against. After the mass loss of life, there were also many among the Shinigami who began to lose heart to a sense of helplessness, but even so, news of the eventual victory was enough to reinvigorate the Gate 13 as one tenacious organization. Although words like all possible measures amounts to nothing in front of Aizen, they nevertheless arrive at the scene of his re-imprisonment by maintaining the maximum degree of vigilance. Be that as it may, it is only Captain Commander Kiyuraku who will ultimately enter Muken. Kiyuraku had asked Aizen about last words as a formality, but he is also well aware that allowing Aizen to talk so heedlessly is dangerous in itself. Even in his present condition, where he is restrained to a chair and various parts of his body sealed, he is still able to exercise Kido. After all, even the very words that comes out of his mouth could end up being one of his schemes. Despite having asked the question himself, Kiyuraku considered that he would have to seal Aizen's voice soon in the event that he brings up something disturbing. However, as if sensing that very scenario, Aizen shook his head whilst flashing a daring smile. Regrettably, there is no one here worth bequeathing my words to. That even includes you, Kiyuraku Shunsui. Glad to hear it. That which is worth to you is only misfortune to others. Though, I wanted to talk to Kurosaki Ichigo a little more. I suppose Urahara Kisake is too mistrusting of me? Ichigo is currently staying at the residence of Shibaku Kaku in the Rukongai together with his father Kurosaki Isin as well as Inoue Arihime and the others. Taking his fighting power into account, Ichigo probably should have been at the scene of Aizen's sealing, however his absence was a precautionary measure taken against Aizen who could potentially influence the likes of the hollow inside Ichigo somehow, or other because Ichigo-kun is by nature an outsider Besides, if you do have something to tell him, it's already been made an end of, don't you think? Speaking as if he were dodging the subject and adjusting his conical hat, Kiyuraku looked down at Aizen with his intact left eye. Although the seals have become more powerful than before thanks to the efforts of Urahara Kisake, he still had no intention of letting his guard down. Kuretsuchi Mayuri, who had just emerged from his life-saving device, attempted to manufacture a new set of physical restraints himself, saying, "Can the so-called countermeasures of Urahara Kisake be trusted?" But there was no time to wait around for that. "Well then, shall we go? After you've finished your prison sentence, I pray that you are an ally of the Soul Society. You express a sentiment that is foreign to your heart." Donning a smile, as if he could see right through everything, Aizen crafts his words without so much as looking at Kiyuraku. "At any rate, do you really believe the Soul Society will continue to exist up until the completion of my prison term?" "Of course. It's our duty to keep it going after all. You saw it at the Soul King Palace too, did you not? The original sin of this very Soul Society." Strangely, Aizen spoke with the same manner of verbal expression as his former subordinate Terrible. Kiyuraku understands. What Aizen speaks of is the thing he observed within the greater palace area of the Soul King Palace. However, he didn't dare to respond to Aizen's words. It remained like that as he led the way to the entrance of Muken. Even if he was to give an answer to Aizen's question, it was just a matter of deciding that it should be done after finally arriving at a place where the voices of the other captains would no longer reach them, and that place is in the depths of Muken. Aizen himself did not expect an answer either, but as if reading the mind of Kiyuraku, or perhaps the surrounding Shinigami, he utters a sarcastic remark. "I didn't take you for a man of few words. Are you afraid that a conversation with me will inspire treachery among the Shinigami? Like Tosin Kaname perhaps?" Then, in the next instant, a voice filled with anger echoed across to the front of the 1st Division barracks. "You're full of shit." The one who raised his voice in anger was not Kiyuraku. It was a Shinigami who was short of breath and appeared to have just come sprinting all the way to this spot. A young Shinigami characterized by the scars and tattoos on his face, it is the vice captain of Squad 9, Hisagi Shuhei. His bandaged body was painful to look at, it seemed as if he had just slipped out of the sanatorium of the 4th Division. In fact, he is still in a condition that can only be described as being covered head to toe in wounds. His body had been shot through by Lil Baro, who is a member of Yahaba's Shitstaffel, and after taking damage to his Seketsu, binding chain, and Hakusui, soul sleep, which can also be described as the heart for a Shinigami, Hisagi found himself on the verge of death. Nevertheless, because the power of Lil's X-axis was so acute, his body tissue, with the exception of the hole that had been pierced into him, was spared complete devastation. Miraculously, he had escaped death. Although his physical wounds had at least healed, after receiving medical treatment from Arihime, Hisagi could not so easily recover the Ryatsu he had lost at the time his Hakusui took damage, and he had practically fallen into a comatose state for a period of several days. In spite of the fact that he has not yet recovered completely, he had arrived before Aizen, who was about to be resealed. One of the reasons he harbored for forcing himself to rush over to this place is to fulfill his duty as vice captain of Squad 9. Hisagi's superior, the captain of Squad 9 Muguruma Kensei, had come to a state of apparent death after his body was zombified. He was placed inside the 12th Division's special medical treatment capsule in order to return him to his original state. It is precisely for this reason, even if he was barely able to move by himself, that he intended to keep a watchful eye on the scene. And another reason, though this was his subconscious mind, it was out of personal sentiment that he wanted to plainly see with his very own eyes the imprisonment of the man who was the cause of ruin for his former superior Tosin Kaname. As a matter of fact, he must have accepted it within his heart. If Aizen is imprisoned once again here and now, everything works out peacefully. Thinking there is no way he can afford to complicate the conversation with his own personal grudges, Hisagi clenched his fist tightly and tried to restrain himself. However, that resolve would be broken by Aizen's words, which could be heard as soon as he hastened to him. "Do you mean to say that Captain Tosin bent his conviction at the likes of your words? Do not speak in such a strange manner, Hisagi Shuhei." Aizen retorted with a calm and self-possessed attitude in front of Hisagi, who had exposed his anger. "You never bore witness to the moment Tosin Kaname decided to have a change of heart, did you? Because, by the time you had become a Shinigami, Tosin Kaname was already my subordinate. Shuhei-kun, your anger is legitimate. But, I'm sorry. Won't you hold back for now?" "Yes, understood, Captain Commander." Upon hearing Kiyuraku speak, as if in warning, Hisagi composed himself after appearing to be on the verge of extending his arm to his Zanpakuto. Meanwhile, he opened his mouth to address Aizen. "You may have put up a united front with Kurosaki to defeat Yahaba, but no matter what you try to do, to me, you will eternally be the one who brought ruin to Captain Tosin." How many times has he called that word to mind when he hears the name Aizen? However, it was something which evoked two meanings at the same time, both an affirmation and a denial. In his heart, there is certainly a hatred for Aizen, who led Tosin down the wrong path and ultimately caused his downfall. On the other hand, while being held captive to strong negative feelings, doubts and frustrations towards himself were sweeping through him. From the point of view of Hisagi, who was trapped in his desire for revenge and had moved to put a stop to Tosin's misguided ways, for him to speak of revenge was nothing more than an insult to the Shinigami, including Captain Kamamura, who had joined him on the battlefield, and perhaps above all, an insult towards Tosin himself. As if perceiving what was in his heart, Aizen wore a faint smile and stringed together his cruel words. "Eternity, that's not something you can speak so lightly of, don't you agree? After all, even Tosin Kaname's convictions were not eternal." You say that like," the angry voice of an enraged Hisagi is pushed back by Aizen, who continued his speech. "You seem to misunderstand one thing." A calm voice. And yet, it was a thick voice with a distinct force that managed to overwhelm the shouts of Hisagi. "It is not that the case that I killed Tosin Kaname with my own hands as a remnant of a defeated soldier that must be punished." A momentary pause. Disregarding the bewilderment of those around him, Aizen encapsulated his will in a brief few words. "It was my idea of mercy." The air surrounding them freezes at those words. Not only Hisagi, but also Kiyuraku and the Shinigami in the vicinity were all unable to immediately decipher the meaning behind the words Aizen had just uttered. Pushing aside the relative silence, Hisagi opens his mouth to speak as his tightly clenched fist shook. "Your mercy?" In response to Aizen, who made this brazen proclamation, Hisagi boiled in anger even more. Not towards Aizen. It was anger towards his own weakness which allowed such a man to kill Tosin Kaname so easily. "Just how much more do you intend to make a fool of Captain Tosin, you bastard?" As things stood, it's clear that both Inoue Orihime and Unohana Retsu would eventually arrive later and try to save Tosin Kaname. But, I suppose you lot wouldn't understand what that would mean for him. If Tosin Kaname had continued to live as he was, he would eventually have had to accept the unparalleled despair thrust upon him, and his heart would rot away completely. I could not bring myself to let the owner of such beautiful resolve be strangled to death by further despair. For this reason, I granted mercy a death as a tribute to my most loyal subordinate. That is simply all there is to it." Shuhei could not fully comprehend what the other man was saying. Despite this, he doesn't appear to evade the situation with half-minded excuses either. Turning his attention away from a perplexed Hisagi, Aizen continued to cast words towards the Shinigami around him. "Sooner or later, the time will come when the lot of you will also learn how this very soul society and what's known as Shinigami are being shaped by dangerous illusions. Let's call it a day, shall we? I didn't take you for a chatterbox." Having put a stop to Aizen's speech, Kiyuraku issues instructions to the punishment force in order to have Aizen transported to the entrance of Muken. "Please wait, Captain Commander." "What the heck is that guy Aizen?" Soifun, the captain of Squad 2, stood in the path before Hisagi, who appeared incapable of coming to an understanding. Then, in the blink of an eye, she had twisted one of Hisagi's arms upwards whilst rotating behind him. "That's enough. Do you honestly think that your sorry self is the only one to be robbed of friends by that guy?" Gah. But Captain Soifan. If someone on your level could avenge the blood of the fallen, then we would have dealt with it already. Your conduct is only bringing a roguish degree of disorder to your surroundings. It was Hisagi himself who was more aware of that fact than anyone else. On his own he could do nothing against a mighty presence that is Aizen. What can he possibly do when he is so shaken by the mere words that leave Aizen's mouth? It was an impossible task to kill him, no matter how much hatred one harbored. Having said that, forgiving or forgetting is out of the question. Hisagi had come to understand that a long time ago. As he was being hauled away, chair and all, Aizen inclined his head slightly and directed his gaze at Hisagi. Swinging one's blade out duty alone is a captain's job. Swinging one's blade out of hatred is nothing more than filthy violence. Hitsugaya Toshiro once told me that. Hisagi could do nothing but sink into a silence at those words. Though he got the impression that he is still described as being a far cry from the rank of captain, given that he also ended up agreeing with that statement himself, he cast his eyes down and forcefully grinds his teeth out of vexation instead of issuing a rebuttal. However, Aizen negated even Hisagi's regretfulness. You can rest assured. What you are harboring is not hatred. It is merely sentimentality for your lost Tosin Kaname and the impression he left behind. You should remember. No matter how solid one's resolution is, it is impossible to slaughter a warrior with mere sentiment. Suddenly, Kiyuraku gives a firm clap of his hands in order to break up the conversation. Okay, alright, didn't I tell you to stop there? Won't you stop using your Ryatsu to frighten these children responsible for carrying you? There's no one worth bequeathing your words to in this place, correct? When the Shinigami shifted their eyes at those words, they saw that the members of the punishment force, who were carrying Aizen, that was sealed and immobilized in his chair, had all broken out into a cold sweat from every inch of their bodies. That's merely what I call entertainment. I'll be spending my time in boredom from now on after all, whether or not the future of Soul Society changes even in the slightest with my modest words, I'll try to look forward to it by keeping myself guessing. I can't say your idea of fun is a good one, you know. The members of the punishment force who at that point were finally released from the influence of his Ryatsu frantically catch their breath as they begin to advance forward once more. In the small interval that existed until he had completely disappeared underground, as if feeling something out, Aizen bombarded the Shinigami around him with more words in a calm voice that remained as unchanged as the first time they had heard it. If you want to see the truth without obstruction, you must struggle onwards with your own flesh, blood and soul as a sacrifice. Then, he adds a final few words which could be taken as a superfluity towards Hisagi Shuhei, who was left standing in a daze. At least, Tosin Kaname continued to do so. Were you not also aware of that? And thus, the heinous criminal who defeated Yuhaba together with Kurosaki Ichigo disappeared into the depths of darkness. Without believing in the slightest that Aizen's speech, which took on a philosophical view of the world, was that of a prisoner, many among the Shinigami knit their eyebrows in disapproval at his insolent reluctance to admit defeat. However, many among the captain ranks gather their wits after locking it up in a corner of their hearts that he is a man who plays with falsehoods, but he is not a man who says meaningless things. Hisagi was unable to put his emotions into order until the very last moment, and Aizen's words slowly turned into a poison that had come to remain in his heart. That poison would never distort Hisagi's heart, but instead it gnawed at his very fate, and before long, it would lure him to a battle. Or perhaps, even if there was no poison left behind by Aizen, it was always a fate he had to arrive at, as long as he was the Shinigami following Tosin's way. Hisagi Shuhei is neither a prophet nor an omniscient and omnipotent being, naturally there is no way he could know his own future. He is not a hero that remained in people's memories like Kurosaki Ichigo, neither is he a sheer powerhouse like Kenpachi Zaraki, nor a man of wisdom like Urahara Kisuke. He is not an inventor like Kuretsuchi Mayuri, he has no status like that of Kachiki Byakuya, he is not a prodigy like Hitsugaya Toshiro, he has no experience like that of Yamamoto Genryusai, no flamboyance like that of Kiyuraku Shunsui, no vigor like that of Kamamura Sajin, no fearlessness like that of Mugiuruma Kensei. In this regard, he would speak in self-mockery over a drink, saying whether I aim for captaincy or continue to remain as vice-captain, my shortcomings are countless, but there are a few qualities he possesses. Namely, his pride as a Shinigami. Hisagi Shuhei had yet to know. Yet to know that in order to protect such a commonplace thing which practically all Gatei 13 troops held as their own foundations, he would have to fight with the fate of the world on his back. It was only half a year after the end of the war when he would face that reality, and this is the end of Prologue 2 of the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World. On the next video, We're going to start the Volume 1 Chapter 1 of the Bleach light novel. I hope you like it and I'll see you on the next video.